So defending champs from last year, Perth Scorchers. How do you think they're doing?
Perth is probably the simplest team on the whole WBBL spectrum because they do things kind of like Sydney Sixers used to do in 2016, 2017 because it's like the whole their internationals are doing the all the heavy lifting, and yet there is you know a second kind of second. I don't want to say second choice because that's the wrong word. I mean, they're all the part of same playing 11, but uh, let's say simply that their internationals include of Beth Mooney, there's Marzan Cab, there's Sophie Devine, there's Alana King, who is relatively new, but obviously she's also international. And these are the guys that are doing everything for them. And we saw in the previous year what they could do for them. Obviously, Cap and Divine to they mostly cover up the power play bowling. Both of them are pacers, and they also cover up the top order of the batting alongside Beth Mooney. So and I mean, they will not have Heather Graham and Chamari Etapattu this year, which is a little bit of a hit for them because that weakens their batting a little bit. But I think that still doesn't turn off the fact that they still have a very strong international core that covers both their bowling and batting, and they have now included Holly Furling and Maddie Green. So Maddie Green will obviously cover up for Chamari Tapattu as a middle order bat, and Holly Furling would be another pacer. So I think they are covered up on all the phases, and looks like they'll have another dominating season like they did last year.
And I see they're coached by Shelly Nichka, who's also the head coach of the Australian women's team. That's
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah, actually, I think she has been their coach for a while now, and uh, the title victory last year was actually their first. So it is kind of weird because previously the team kind of had a tumultuous situation due to some personal stuff. I mean, they had players like Valani, Bolton. There was Catherine Brunt and Nat Sever as well. At some point, they also had Amy Jones, but for some reason they never won the whole thing. But last year it seemed like things came together for them. I mean, they even beat the other uh, teams that made it to the playoff rather easily. So it was always kind of going to be their tournament to lose, and they did not.
So what about runners-up from last year, Adelaide Strikers?
Adelaide Strikers. Last year the whole Adelaide run was really weird for me in multiple senses because when you see their run, from the beginning, it almost seems like they are kind of like the fifth ranking or fourth ranking team. But I think you have picked up this point previously. Peaking at the right time was something they did really well last year. I mean, they basically ran over Melbourne Renegades in the eliminator, where I think they bowled them out for 70 odd, and obviously made it to the finals. And kind of the final did not go that well for them. But even outside of that, I mean, Adelaide Strikers actually have a really strong Aussie core. They have Darcy Brown, there's Talia McGrath, who is obviously the captain. There's Megan Shoot, but I think one thing that they'll miss is Danevan Nikak, who, I mean, she was someone who can hold things together. I mean, we have seen her for Oval Invincibles previously. They have won both their titles, and she looked like someone who controls things really well for the team because she's basically an anchor with the bat, and she also bowls really useful leggies. So they are kind of going to miss her, and they're also going to miss Sarah Coit, who was their one of their pacers. She's now into Renegades. But even out of that, I think they're still pretty strong. I mean, not as strong as a team because obviously they are losing some experience here, but they have an interesting aspect, interesting prospect coming in with Anesu Mushangwe, who is, although she is Zimbabwean, she is actually Australian resident, and she has been playing on the South Australian circuit for a while, and I think she's going to be pretty interesting to follow in this edition of WBBL.
So last season, second place on the points table was the Melbourne Renegades, but they ended up finishing lower than that in the knockout stage. How about them?
Melbourne Renegades. Now that is my team, so I can probably talk more about it than any others. But Melbourne Renegades is actually quite weird in multiple senses because if you look at their squad, you'll probably see there's quite a heavy, lack of experience is probably not the right word, but the team is actually very young. I mean, it used to be young, but now they have, inducted Shabnam Ismail and Haley Matthews. I mean, Haley Matthews is kind of young, but she also brings a lot of experience. So even though they were pretty young, they gelled really well last year. I mean, they kind of had their priorities pretty picked in because they wanted to go with a top heavy batting attack and a very spin oriented bowling attack last year. As we saw, they had two pacers in Ellie Falconer and Holy Furling that they did not use a lot. And I think that kind of hurt them to some extent. And as it seems, I think they have realized that and they have covered it because now they've got Taylor Willemink, there's Sarah Coit and Georgia Presvich, plus there's also Shabnam Ismail. So I think they have basically bolted up their bowling attack with pacers, and even though they have left out the batters in Jemima Rodriguez, Eve Jones, and Jess Duffin, they still have a lot of batting, with their already pre-existing batters. So I think it does them justice to kind of strengthen the part that needed to be strengthened because they already had a lot of batting. They failed as a unit rather than individuals. So I guess they have covered all their steps. So I expect them to do as well as they did last year and probably go even further.
It's interesting looking at the points table last year because the Renegades won 8, lost 4, but they had a negative net run rate.
Yeah, actually, that was due to their last two games, and plus, I think what happened is they were obviously kind of over dependent on their overseas batters. Eve Jones and Jamima Rodriguez were the ones that would usually give them the start, and then Harmanpreet Kaur would finish it up. But I think there were three games. One was the Perth Scorcher game where they conceded like 190 and could not chase it. They lost it what 1-4. They could only score 140, and I think they lost the last two games really badly. So that is what made their run rate go really low.
An interesting team looking at this list is Hobart Hurricanes. So Hobart finished 6th last year, but it seems that they picked a lot of very promising young players because 4 of their players got Cricket Australia contracts after signing with Hobart.
Yeah, actually, last year, I think you bring up a really good point. Even though they ranked so low, if you'd see those games, you'd see that they are, a much better team than the points table suggests, because there was a lot of games where the batting did really well. Rachel Priest was probably giving them really good starts. There was Richa Ghosh. I think she finished what, three games, three chases with her bat. So actually they did really well in a few of the games. But the thing was, whenever they failed kind of badly, which hurt them. I mean, against Perth Scorchers, they were 19 for 6 at one point, and that included a dropped catch as well. So I think that was the whole thing with them, that even though they had a few promising faces and people doing well, it was still kind of an overall lackluster result, lackluster tournament for them result wise.
So how do you see them doing this year? Do you think their young core can step up, or do you think it'll be more of the same for Hobart?
As far as Hobart goes, actually, Hobart Hurricane is getting some reinforcement this time because they'll be getting Lizelle Lee first of all, and you cannot count out Lizelle Lee because she is one of the best, especially in the T20 format. She has already shown what she can do both in the 100 and Big Bash. I think she has 100 in Big Bash as well. And other than that, they'll also be getting. I mean, Easy Wong is out due to an injury, obviously, but they'll be getting Elis Villani. There's Heather Graham. So obviously, there's some good things coming their way. That that would make their core really strong because if you see in the first glance, then Villani, Carey, Lee, Dupree, and Heather Graham sounds like a really good core. Plus, there's Ruth Johnston and Molly Strano as well. So I feel like if the core can work well, I think they can make it to the playoffs really rather easily because that top order is actually very scary to look at right now.
Another team with a lot of players that got Cricket Australia contracts after the signing period for the WBBL 8 began is the Sydney Sixers. They also have four, just like Hobart. But unlike Hobart, the Sixers finished last year, despite having Elise Perry, Alyssa Healy, and Ash Gardner on the team, and Susie Bates. So how did that happen?
So that is kind of an interesting team because you know I think we often joke about RCB being the kind of team who has a lot of players, big names, but they do not come off, because last year the situation where the Sydney Sixers got really grim at the end because they were not even getting to 100. They had a lot of totals around 80s and 90s. Even when they crossed 100, they would get to like 120 hardly, and it just felt like nothing was working for them. I mean, Gardner and Healy got out early a lot of times, and Perry, even though she was trying a lot, you could see in a few of the games that she was trying to save the team. There was Nicole Bolton, she tried, but it did not seem to come off. I mean, Shefali Verma didn't do much for them. There was Radha Yadav, who, even though she did well for what was expected of her, but ultimately there was nothing much they could do. I mean, if you are being 30 for 5 or 30 for 6 in every other game, then I mean, no one can help you from that situation, especially in a T20.
The Sixers were also coached by Charlotte Edwards, who turned down the vacant England women's job, presumably to get more experience in T20 leagues like this. So how do you see them doing this year?
Actually, this is her first. I think this will be the first year of her coaching Sydney, and I think she has already started affecting the decision making because already we have Sophie Eccleston in the team, so that is one big signing, and as I said, the Sydney Sixers of 2016-17 was one of the best T20 franchisee team that was ever assembled by anyone. But I guess now Scorchers would never let go of Cap, and I don't think it would be that easy to get Danewan Nikag as well. But I think if they can get someone like Sophie Eccleston and obviously Ashley Gardner has been doing well in the international, so you'd expect better from her this time. I mean, Healy has kind of still been out of touch even in the domestic circuit if you are following that. So even out of that, I'd say the score is pretty strong, and if it pulls through, then it can be one of the best teams. It's just that it is one of those simple situations where none of that worked for them last year. So I don't think there's a lot of thinking to do. Just they have to work as a team. And as far as Charlotte Edward goes, we have seen her coaching Southern Brave, and they have done well. So I'd expect the same from Sydney Sixers as well.
Last season was not good for the city of Sydney because the other Sydney team, the Thunder, finished second to last.
Sydney Thunder. Actually, Sydney Thunder makes me really curious because as I said about Renegades, there was a similar theme going with the Sydney Thunder as well. I mean, they had a really, really young team. Even their overseas signings were, I mean, they were not inexperienced, but Mandana, Wong, Deepti Sharma were all pretty young. I mean, they are still pretty young. So from what I saw last year, it seemed like they didn't just have a really good team, and seems like same could be the case this year as well. Because if you look at their squad right now, it's Haynes, Bates, Rachel Haynes, Sam Bates. There's Hannah Darlington, there's Jessica Davidson, there's Phoebe Litchfield, Olivia Porter, Lauren Smith, Talia Wilson. So even though they have a lot of good stuff, and there's also Amy Jones coming up for them because she's the one they signed as an overseas player. I think the team still lacks, star power of the proportions that other teams have. I mean, Sydney Sixers were the ones that ranked last year, but you cannot underestimate their star power and the explosiveness that they hold. But it does not seem to be the case with Thunder, and I mean, I'd be surprised if they do any better than they did last year, even this year.
So the Sixers and the Thunder, they are got the joint most WBBL titles with two each. The other team with two WBBL titles is the Brisbane Heat, who finished third last season. So how do you rate their chances this year?
Actually, Brisbane Heat was a really weird team last year, from what I remember, because they kind of had some weird games here and there, some really good games as well. Because I remember their clash with the Perth Scorchers. There, I think there was the first of the two, where it kind of turned into a meme game because and both teams were equally hell bent on losing. I think the match went to super over, and first it was Maizan Cap who bowled like five bouncers, all of which were kind of venomless, and they went for 15 runs. And then for Brisbane Heat, it was just Jonathan who bowled actually back-to-back full tosses, which one of which was a no ball, and both of them went for six, and the super over ended almost abruptly. But even out of jokes, I think they have a really good side. Maybe it did not click in a few games, but I mean, they carry a lot of experience, and it is only further increased with bringing up someone like Danny Wyatt, who has already shown how well she can do, because she has even scored 100 in T20 100 in Australia in a chase. And they have the Harris sisters, who are already pretty experienced, and they have done well for their team. Georgia Redmayne, who is the opener, she was one of the highest run getters last time. Although they have released, uh, you know, a few of their overseas players. There's no Poonam Yadav, there's no De Klerk or Bosch, and there's Georgia Presvich who's gone. I think this whole uh, new arrival of the overseas players kind of puts them further up, because now they do not have to pick and choose, because these players would probably fill every role. I mean, obviously Danny White can open with Redmayne. There's Pooja Vastrakar who they can put at 6 or 7. She can fill the role of one of the pace option as well as the all rounder. And then there's Amelia Kerr, who can be the is the leg spinning all rounder. So I think you add this to their already existing core, and I think this team is decently strong. It is kind of those 8 out of 10 kind of team that can actually fling up a surprise as well.
The Heat, interestingly coached by Ashley Nofke, who's a bit of a cult hero down in Queensland. Played for the men's team for 10 years and then became bowling coach for a few years. Now he's coaching Queensland's WBBL team, the Brisbane Heat. So that brings us to the last team now, the Melbourne Stars, who will be without Meg Lanning for the tournament.
Yeah, Melbourne Stars, they are in kind of a weird situation, because obviously McLanning will be pulling out of the tournament. But their biggest loss is Elise Villani, who pretty much carried their batting order last year. So there's Erin Osborne, who is retired, so she goes out. But even outside of that, I think their overseas signings are really good. There's Jamima Rodriguez and there's Alice Capsey, so that gives you two batting options which are really good. And they already have Kim Garth as as the Irish pacer. But the problem is, even though these are some really good options, there's also Annabelle Sutherland. But then there's this whole line of young players. There's Tess Flintoff, there's Reese McKenna, there's Sasha Maloney, and more. And it seems like they are lacking on the experience part. I mean, as it happened last year, it seemed like Villani was the only one who was fighting, and it could easily be the case for them again, since even they have lost Meg Lanning. So seems like the chances are still pretty grim for them, even with the arrival of the batting options from the overseas.